Let's have a lesson and discussion on this work. Follow us for free and just pick up all the tips from the video. But if you're interested, I do have a sheet music edition of Caprice number 1 to 4, and there's a link for that in the description. So in my little collection of 4 here, I would say number 3 is actually the most difficult to bring to finishing level. I know it's not as flashy as like number 2, which might seem like, oh, it's fast, it's probably very difficult. But I would say number 3, although initially fairly easy to play, bringing it to like a refinement or finishing point is just a little bit trickier. Probably just due to the fact that like most of the time in the piece you have 3-note chords playing. So that means lots of navigation, but also just like a control over the texture. So in regards to that, I mean, you have this beautiful melody at the beginning, so you want to make sure to practice that on its own and make sure that you can play that melody beautifully in the way that you want. And then when you add the notes, the other notes in, you know, it's tricky to navigate sometimes in like a refined way. It's not that tricky to actually play it, but to navigate it in a refined way is a little bit challenging. So, but when you go to do that, if you know that melody beautifully and how beautifully it can be connected and legato and whatnot, then you'll have like a basis to work on, right? Something to really keep in the front of your mind for context. Now, the other thing in this piece is that there's quite a few muted rests, and I would say the muted rests are, I follow them, but they're not just like a mute or a rest. It's really about controlling the sustain of the previous notes. Like if you're in measure 13 or something, you can see my thumb went back down. You know, I continue to mute the bass note there, or like again at measure 34 about. I'm kind of overdoing it at the moment, but those mutes kind of give it a little bit of like pent-up energy that wouldn't necessarily be there if we were just playing it all super legato. That would be really calm. How am I doing that? As opposed to like giving it just a little bit of like punch, you know, and kind of like a hidden energy. So I think going through the piece initially, not too difficult, despite like some awkward like shifts here and there, but like making sure that you're refining that texture really well is, I think, the most important thing. So from there, I think we can just do like a walk through the piece and we'll point out some other things along the way. But I would just highly recommend in this piece that you really make sure you have your priorities all set and that you understand what you want to do with the piece right off the bat. And then you can go about practicing it from the very beginning with those things in mind. So it starts off with like, it's simple and secure, but it's a little bit of like an awkward thing in terms of the fingering just because you have to hold down this accompaniment while playing this melody. So in that section there, I shift down here. That way I can get this and slide into this shape. It might seem kind of annoying though. The main thing here though is you want a combination of security, but you also want to be able to access the next chord shape very calmly and easily, because it is, although it has some pent-up energy, it's a calm piece too. So you don't want there to be like crazy movements in the left hand. You want to be able to just move into shapes really calmly. And that's why I use some of those fingerings, is that I just found it allowed me to arrive in a place that really comfortably, as opposed to fingering the movement more easily. Okay, so from measure 9 there. Make sure you mute through there. You know, I think it really highlights that upper note in this kind of meditative way. You can see I'm muting the bass. Oops, let's see. Do that section again from measure 13 there. So mute, 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 mute. Can't play and talk at the same time. This accented section. And just remember, with those mutes, it's not so much about the silence of the mute itself. It's about getting a certain amount of sustain out of those held quarter notes. You want focus more on the sustain of those notes rather than focusing on the mute itself. If you're trying to be precise about the mute on an eighth note, which you do want to be precise to some extent, but it's much more noticeable if you hear like different lengths of sustain on those quarter notes. And that's something like, if I were to do this a lot more, I would work a lot on getting those super consistent. That's something that if I was recording the piece for like an album or something, I would want to be super consistent and just really work on that sustain level. Okay, so from 23 at that accented section. Advice in there is just really follow the accents. If you accent and then back off, you'll find it offers a lot of relief to the left hand. Otherwise, it's a lot of bar chords, and like the possibility of tension building up in the hand is a real possibility. So just accent, release, and it musically is nice too. You don't have to crash, 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 crash. You know, you don't want to be crashing through everything. So follow that accent pattern for many reasons. And then you arrive at measure 27. Really nice section. Emphasize the bass a little bit more, because a lot of the movement is in that bass. I used 3-2 here so that the one finger is available for that B. And muting in the bass, mute, 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 mute. Soft, loud, and I think you can really, it's a tough chord change, but you can really place it like soft, and then like place it with a cue even, like, and it makes sense musically, and then soft. Now this was a debate for me, but like following the eighth note mutes in this section is, again, very important that you sustain the upper voice for the amount that you want to be consistent. So I'm placing my fingers back on the strings to mute. Sorry. You might find this particularly difficult just because it's just less common to have the bass continuing to go while you mute like chords with your hand. And even when I was demonstrating it there, I messed it up once or twice because if I start thinking about it, it still bothers me a little bit. But what you do is you just create some muscle memory with it. You can just take like a little one group there. And remember, don't just focus on getting a mute. Think about the sustain of the chord. Or put that into your muscle memory and you won't have to think about it too much. So there's lots of looping activities. Next one up there. It's a challenging little section, and you know, I forgot to switch there too. Switch the second finger, and then this chord. I sustain it for a little bit longer than a quarter note on those last chords, just to get some juice out of them. Those last few measures actually give me a lot of grief and trouble, but it's really nice when you get it. Like, it feels really good, and you can tell, like, you can very clearly tell when you do it properly. Because like when you're practicing it, it might sound like really not so great. But when you actually get it and you get like a certain amount of sustain off those chords and you're keeping that bass running, it's actually really satisfying and it feels really good. So don't get frustrated with it. Just like spend extra time with it and turn it into muscle memory, and then just really open your ears and listen to each of the sustained quarter notes and make sure you're getting the sound that you want. So like I said, not a flashy piece, but definitely I found it to be the more challenging one of the four, despite that the other ones have much more like activity and speed and all sorts of like, you know, capricious character to it. But this one is like understated a little bit, and you have to make sure that you don't underestimate it after the first reading. Like, really think about that musicality and work it in from the beginning so that you're on the right track to the refinement that you'll need later.